Admiral Zeftar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Crimson Emperor. Through the massive viewing screen, he could see thousands of red warships stretching across space like angry stars. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a moon. Together, they formed the largest attack fleet in the history of the Calvarian Empire. For 3,000 years, the Empire had ruled the galaxy. Their red ships had visited every corner of space, bringing order to chaos and strength to weakness. Hundreds of worlds bowed before the Crimson Banner. Countless species had learned to fear the sight of those red hulls cutting through the darkness. Now they moved toward a small blue world at the edge of nowhere. The planet was called Earth, and it was home to creatures called humans. The Empire's scientists had studied these beings for months. Their reports all said the same thing. Humans were weak, divided, and no threat to anyone. Zeftar had read the files himself. The humans still fought each other with primitive weapons. They used chemical rockets to barely escape their own atmosphere. Their strongest bombs could only destroy cities, not continents. Most telling of all, they could not even unite their own species under one banner. Pathetic, Zeftar had said when he first read about them, but the Empire had rules. All intelligent species must join the Empire or face destruction. There were no exceptions. The Crimson Fleet did not care if a species was strong or weak. The law was the law. The journey to Earth had taken 6 months. During that time, Zeftar had studied everything the Empire knew about humans. They were a young species, having discovered space travel only recently. Their planet was rich in resources the Empire could use. Their population was large enough to provide good workers once they were properly trained. Most importantly, they seemed incapable of working together. The Empire's spies had counted over 200 different nations on Earth. These nations constantly argued and sometimes fought wars against each other. A species that could not unite against itself would never unite against the Empire. "Admiral," called his aide, approaching with a data tablet. "We will reach the human solar system in 12 hours. Zeftar nodded. "Send word to all ship commanders. They are to prepare for standard occupation protocol. The humans will surrender quickly once they see our strength." The aide hesitated. "Sir, there is one odd thing in our intelligence reports. The humans have some old military files that mention something called Project Lazarus. Our spies could not access the details." "Ancient history," Zeftar said with a wave of his hand. "Probably some failed weapon project from their primitive past. These creatures barely understand energy weapons. What could they have built that would concern us?" As the hours passed, more reports came in from scout ships that had already entered the human system. Earth had orbital defense platforms around their planet. They had a small fleet of about 300 ships. Their weapons appeared to be basic plasma cannons and nuclear missiles. "Admiral," reported Captain Vorthak from the destroyer Crimson Talon, "human defenses are even weaker than expected. Their largest warship is smaller than our escort fighters. This will not even be a battle." Zeftar smiled. Another easy conquest for the Empire. In a few days, the Red Banner would fly over Earth, and the humans would begin their new lives as productive citizens of the galaxy's greatest civilization. The fleet dropped out of faster than light travel at the edge of the human solar system. Immediately, every sensor screen lit up with contacts. The humans had detected them. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the human planet. They are requesting to speak with our commander." "Put it through," Zeftar ordered. The main screen flickered, then showed the face of a human female. She wore a military uniform and had gray hair pulled back tightly. Her eyes were steady and calm, showing no fear despite the massive fleet now threatening her world. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said. "You have entered our solar system with obvious hostile intent. State your purpose. Zephyr stepped forward. I am Admiral Zephyr of the Calvarian Empire. We have come to offer your species a choice. Join the Empire willingly, and your people will be treated well as new citizens. Refuse and your world will be destroyed. You have 24 of your hours to decide. The human admiral studied his face for a long moment. Then, something strange happened. She smiled. It was not the smile of fear or madness. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. Admiral Zephyr, she said quietly. We have been expecting you. The transmission ended, leaving Zephyr staring at a blank screen. Around him, his officers looked confused. Expecting us? Captain Vorthek asked. How could they have been expecting us? We used routes unknown to their science. Zephyr frowned. The human's words troubled him, but he could not say why. Perhaps it was simply bravado in the face of certain defeat. Many species tried to appear brave when the Empire arrived. It never mattered in the end. Begin standard approach, he ordered. All ships to battle positions. We will show these humans the might of the Empire. Once they see a few of their orbital platforms destroyed, they will realize resistance is hopeless. The Crimson Fleet moved forward like a tide of red death. Behind them, the void of space seemed darker somehow, as if the universe itself held its breath to see what would happen when the Empire's greatest fleet met. Earth's forgotten weapon. On Earth. In a deep bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically at a computer terminal. Ancient files scrolled across her screen. Files that had been buried and forgotten for over 2 centuries. She had found it at last, Project Lazarus. As she read the documents, her hands began to shake. My God, she whispered. What were they thinking? Above her, the red ships of the Empire grew larger against the stars, and the fate of 2 species hung in the balance. The first human orbital platform died in silence. The massive space station simply vanished in a ball of white fire when the Calvarian plasma cannons hit it. No explosion, no debris field. Just there one moment and gone the next. Admiral Sarah Chun watched from the bridge of the Earth flagship. Defiance as her carefully built defenses were swept away like paper in a storm. The orbital platforms had taken 20 years to build and represent the best of human engineering. The aliens had destroyed 6 of them in less than 10 minutes. Admiral called her tactical officer. The enemy fleet is maintaining distance and picking off our platforms one by one. Our return fire is not even scratching their shields. Chun nodded grimly. The Calvarian technology was far beyond anything Earth possessed. Their ships moved faster, hit harder, and seemed almost immune to human weapons. She had known this battle was hopeless before it started, but Earth had to try. Humanity had never surrendered without a fight. Order all fleet units to attack Pattern Delta, she commanded. Take us in close. If we cannot hurt them from range, we will ram them if necessary. The human fleet surged forward. 300 ships against 10,000 seemed like madness, but the humans charged anyway. Earth's finest pilots pushed their engines to dangerous levels, racing toward the red wall of enemy vessels. Admiral Zephyr watched the human attack with something close to admiration. The little ships were brave. He had to give them that. They flew straight into certain death without hesitation. It reminded him of insects attacking a giant, pointless but somehow noble. Sir, his tactical officer reported. The humans are closing to engagement range. Should we launch fighters? No need, Zephyr replied. Let them come. A few demonstration shots should convince them to surrender. The first wave of human ships reached the Calvarian line. Earth's most advanced destroyer, the Resolute, fired every weapon it had at the enemy flagship. Plasma bolts and nuclear missiles struck the massive red ship. For a moment, Chun dared to hope. Then the enemy ship's shield shimmered, and the attack simply disappeared. The Calvarian vessel had not even slowed down. The return fire was devastating. 3 human ships were destroyed instantly. Then 5 more. The space around Earth filled with the wreckage of humanity's best efforts. Captain Maria Santos of the cruiser Endeavour spoke into her radio as her ship was torn apart around her. "This is Santos to all Earth forces. We cannot penetrate their shields. I repeat, conventional weapons are useless against them. We need a miracle." Her transmission cut off as the Endeavour exploded. Chung felt her heart sink as ship after ship was destroyed. In 30 minutes of fighting, she had lost over half her fleet. The alien ships seemed untouchable. Their weapons struck like the hand of an angry god, while human attacks bounced off them like raindrops. Admiral, her communications officer, called. "We are receiving another message from the enemy flagship." Admiral Zefter's face appeared on the screen again. This time, his expression showed mild irritation rather than formal politeness. "Human commander," he said, "you have fought bravely, but this destruction serves no purpose. Surrender now, and we will spare the remainder of your fleet. Continue this hopeless battle, and every ship in your force will be destroyed." Chung looked around her bridge. Her officers were bloodied, but not broken. Outside the windows, she could see the burning remains of dozens of human ships. But she could also see something else. The rest of her fleet was still fighting. Even as she watched, a squadron of fighters made a suicide run against a Calvarian cruiser. They died without scratching its paint, but they died trying. "Admiral Zeftar," she said, "I have a counteroffer for you. Leave our system now, and we will let you go home alive." The alien admiral stared at her in shock. Then he began to laugh. "Remarkable," he said. "Even facing certain death, you still threaten me. Very well, human. You have chosen destruction. All ships, commence bombardment of the human fleet. Leave none alive." The screen went dark, and hell began in earnest. The remaining human ships were hunted down one by one. The Calvarian fleet spread out across the solar system like a vast net, destroying everything that moved. Escape pods were vaporized. Damaged ships trying to limp away were finished off without mercy. Chun's own ship, the Defiance, was one of the last to die. Surrounded by enemy vessels, her crew fought to the end. The bridge filled with smoke, and the lights failed one by one. As the final enemy shots tore through her hull, Chun gave her last order. "All stations, this is Admiral Chun. Evacuate to the moonbase. Continue the fight from there. Never give up. Do you hear me? Never give up." The Defiance broke apart in a burst of flame, taking Earth's top military commander with it. From his flagship, Admiral Zefter watched the destruction with professional satisfaction. The human fleet had been completely destroyed. Their orbital platforms were gone. Earth lay naked before his guns, with no defenses left except a few small bases on their moon. "Sir," his aide reported, "we have destroyed all human military forces in space." The surviving commanders appear to have retreated to their lunar facilities. "Shall we pursue?" "Not necessary," Zefter replied. "They have nowhere to run now. Signal all ships to take positions around Earth. We will give the humans 12 hours to consider their situation. Then demand surrender." Deep beneath the mountains of Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked with desperate speed. Around her, teams of scientists and technicians prepared systems that had not been used for over 2 centuries. The computers were ancient by modern standards, but they still worked. More importantly, they contained secrets that had been deliberately forgotten. Project Lazarus had been the most classified program in human history. Created during the darkest days of Earth's resource wars, it represented humanity's darkest thoughts about warfare. The project had been so disturbing that world leaders had ordered it buried and forgotten. Now, With the survival of the species at stake, Vasquez was bringing it back to life. "Doctor," called her assistant. "The quantum transmitters are coming online. The satellite network is responding to our signals." Vasquez nodded without looking up from her screen. The file she was reading made her sick, but she forced herself to continue. Project Lazarus was not a weapon in any normal sense. It was something far more terrible, a systematic method for destroying the will to fight. The humans who had created it had understood something that the Calvarians did not. The strongest armor could be pierced, the mightiest ship could be destroyed, but the real battle was always fought in the mind. And in that battlefield, humanity had weapons that no alien could imagine. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered. "Target the enemy fleet with everything we have." Above Earth, the Calvarian Armada hung in space like red jewels against the darkness. Inside those ships, 10 million alien warriors prepared for their next easy conquest. They had no idea that Earth's forgotten weapon was already reaching out to touch them. Dr. Elena Vasquez remembered the day she first read about Project Lazarus in a dusty archive beneath Geneva. She had been researching historical military programs for her dissertation on psychological warfare. What she found made her understand why the project had been classified for so long. Dr. Marcus Webb had been a brilliant but troubled man. During Earth's resource wars in 2157, when millions were dying over water and rare metals, he had proposed something that shocked even the military leaders of that brutal time. He wanted to weaponize the human spirit itself. "Physical weapons destroy bodies," Webb had written in his original proposal. But why stop there? Why not destroy the enemy's will to fight? Their desire to live? Their very sense of purpose? The proposal had outlined 3 phases. First, flood enemy communications with carefully crafted messages designed to create doubt and despair. Second, use quantum computers to analyze enemy psychology and predict their breaking points. Third, trigger a cascade effect that would spread psychological collapse through entire armies. The project had been given unlimited funding and the best minds available. For 3 years, teams of psychologists, computer scientists, and military strategists worked to perfect the ultimate weapon, one that would make physical violence unnecessary by destroying the enemy's reasons for fighting. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, and that success had terrified them so much that they buried the project forever. Now, 2 centuries later, Vasquez was activating systems that should never have been built. Around her in the underground facility, massive quantum computers hummed to life. Satellite networks that Earth's enemies had dismissed as space junk began transmitting on frequencies that penetrated every form of known shielding. "Doctor," called her chief technician, "all systems are online. The psychological profiles are being generated based on intercepted Calvarian communications. We should have target data within the hour." Vasquez nodded, trying to ignore the knot of fear in her stomach. What they were about to do was terrible in ways that conventional weapons could never be. But with Earth's military forces destroyed and 10,000 enemy ships preparing to bombard the planet, they had no choice. "Begin transmission of the baseline material," she ordered. "Start with historical records. Make sure every enemy ship receives the signals." High above Earth, the Calvarian fleet maintained perfect formation around the blue planet. Inside the ships, alien crews prepared for what they expected to be a simple occupation. The humans had fought bravely, but uselessly. Now there was nothing left but surrender. Captain Vorthak of the destroyer Crimson. Talon was reviewing supply reports when his communications officer approached with a puzzled expression. "Sir," the officer said, "we are receiving strange transmissions from the planet's surface. They appear to be historical records or entertainment broadcasts. Should we block them?" Vorthak frowned. "What kind of historical records?" Stories, sir. About humans in various situations. Our computers have translated them automatically. They seem harmless. Tales of individuals facing difficult circumstances. Probably some kind of propaganda, Vorthak said dismissively. Let them broadcast their little stories. Soon they will have more important things to worry about. The officer nodded and returned to his station. On his screen, the translated human transmissions continued to scroll by. Stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. A mother protecting her children during a plague. Soldiers holding a position against impossible odds. Scientists working for decades on problems everyone said could not be solved at first. The Calvarian crews ignored the transmissions. Then some began reading them during their off-duty hours. The stories were strangely compelling, filled with emotions and concepts that seemed alien to the ordered military life of the Empire. On the battleship Imperial Wrath, Commander Thelros was reading about something called the Siege of Stalingrad when he felt the first stirring of unease. The story described human soldiers fighting in a ruined city, refusing to surrender even when surrounded and outnumbered. They had fought for months in conditions that should have broken any rational being. Why? Thelros wondered. Why fight when victory was impossible? Why die for a lost cause? The question bothered him more than it should have. The Empire's military doctrine was based on logic and efficiency. When defeat was certain, surrender was the logical choice. Fighting hopeless battles was waste and stupidity. But these humans had done it anyway. Not once, but over and over throughout their history. They fought lost causes with a passion that defied reason. And somehow, many of those lost causes had turned into victories. Similar thoughts were occurring to Calvarian officers throughout the fleet. The human stories were unlike anything in their military education. Empire soldiers were taught to follow orders, achieve objectives, and preserve the force. These humans seemed to fight for concepts that had no tactical value. Things like hope, freedom, and love. On the heavy cruiser Crimson Glory, Lieutenant Zelamon was reading about a human scientist named Marie Curie. The woman had worked for years with dangerous materials, suffering radiation poisoning that slowly killed her. But she had continued her research because she believed it would help her species. Zelamon tried to understand. The Empire had scientists, but they worked for advancement and resource allocation. This human had worked knowing it would kill her for benefits she would never see. It made no sense by any logical measure, yet somehow it moved him. Deep in the underground facility, Dr. Vasquez monitored the quantum computers as they analyzed intercepted Calvarian communications. The alien crews were discussing the transmissions among themselves, asking questions their training had not prepared them to answer. Doctor, her assistant called. We are seeing the first signs of psychological impact. The enemy crews are showing increased discussion of abstract concepts. Their efficiency ratings are beginning to drop. Begin Phase 2, Vasquez ordered, though her stomach churned at the words. Target their specific psychological profiles. Show them what humanity really means. The transmissions changed. Instead of simple historical stories, they now carried something far more dangerous, carefully crafted experiences, designed to make the listeners feel what humans felt. The quantum arrays did not just send information. They sent emotional experiences directly into alien minds. Captain Vorthak was reviewing deployment plans when the new transmissions began. Suddenly, he was not on his ship anymore. He was standing in a bombed human city, watching a father carry his injured daughter to safety. The man was wounded himself, bleeding from multiple injuries. But he kept walking, step by step, because his child needed him to survive. The experience lasted only seconds, but it left Vorthak shaking. He had felt the father's pain, his fear, his desperate love. More importantly, he had felt the man's absolute determination to save his child no matter the cost. That was something the Empire had never taught him. Calvarian society was efficient and logical. Children were raised by the state, not by emotional attachment to parents. Sacrifice for illogical reasons was discouraged, but this human father had been willing to die for his daughter. And in that moment of experiencing the man's emotions, Vorthik understood something that changed him forever. Love was stronger than logic. All across the Calvarian fleet, similar revelations were occurring. Hardened warriors found themselves weeping over stories of human compassion. Strategic planners questioned the morality of conquest after experiencing memories of human courage. Military efficiency began to break down as alien crews struggled with emotions and concepts they had never been taught to handle. Admiral Zefter noticed the changes first as a decrease in communication efficiency. His captains were taking longer to respond to orders. Some were asking questions about the mission that seemed unnecessary. A few had even requested permission to study human culture more deeply. What is wrong with my fleet? He wondered aloud. His aide, studying a report from the medical bay, looked up with concern. Sir, we are receiving reports of psychological disturbances throughout the Armada. Ship's counselors report that crew members are experiencing what they describe as existential confusion. Zefter frowned. Existential confusion? They are questioning the purpose of their service, sir. Asking why we conquer other species. Some are even suggesting that perhaps we should study human culture instead of destroying it. A chill ran down Zeftar's spine. In 30 years of military service, he had never heard of such a thing. Calvarian warriors did not question orders. They did not suffer existential crises. They followed the will of the Empire without doubt or hesitation. Something was very wrong. And somehow, he suspected the humans were responsible. Captain Vorthak had not slept in 18 hours. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the human father carrying his daughter through the burning city. But now there were other memories too. Memories that were not his own but felt completely real. A human woman named Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on a bus, knowing she would be arrested. A man called Nelson Mandela spending decades in prison rather than give up his beliefs. Children in a place called Afghanistan walking miles through dangerous territory just to attend school. Each memory brought with it a flood of human emotions that Vorthak's Calvarian mind was not designed to handle. Courage without hope of victory. Sacrifice without promise of reward. Love that demanded nothing in return. Sir? His second-in-command approached cautiously. The crew is requesting permission to speak with you. They are troubled by the human transmissions. Vorthak looked around his bridge. His crew sat at their stations, but they moved like sleepwalkers. Several had tears running down their faces, an alien expression of emotion that Calvarian physiology rarely displayed. Others stared at their screens without really seeing them. What troubles them? Vorthik asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. They are asking why we fight, sir. Why we conquer peaceful species. What gives us the right to destroy their worlds? These were questions that had never been asked in the 3,000-year history of the Empire. Calvarian military doctrine was simple. The strong ruled the weak. The Empire brought order to chaos. And questioning orders was weakness, but the human transmissions were making his crew question everything. On the battleship Imperial Wrath, Commander Thelrus was experiencing his own crisis. The latest transmission had shown him memories of human children in a place called Hiroshima, singing songs in the ruins after a terrible weapon had destroyed their city. The children were sick and dying, but they sang anyway because music made them happy. Delrose had been a warrior for 25 years. He had participated in the conquest of 12 worlds. He had never questioned the rightness of the Empire's actions because questioning was not part of his training. But these human children, dying from radiation poisoning, had found joy in simple songs. They had created beauty in a place of ultimate destruction. They had chosen hope when despair would have been logical. Why? The question burned in his mind like acid. Why did humans choose hope over logic? Why did they fight impossible battles? Why did they love so deeply that they would die for others? More importantly, why had the Empire never taught him about such things? "Commander," his weapons officer said quietly, "I cannot bring myself to target the human planet. Every time I try to lock onto their cities, I think of the children in the transmissions. How can we kill beings capable of such beauty?" Thalros looked around his bridge. Every member of his crew was nodding in agreement. These were hardened veterans who had bombarded planets before without hesitation. Now they could not bring themselves to harm a species they had been ordered to destroy. "Stand down from combat alert," Thalros ordered. "All weapons to safe position." It was the first time in Imperial history that a ship commander had refused to attack an enemy without being ordered to do so. Similar scenes were playing out across the massive fleet. On ship after ship, Calvarian crews found themselves unable to function as efficient military units. The human transmissions had introduced concepts that their minds could not ignore or forget. Lieutenant Zelamon sat in his quarters aboard the heavy cruiser Crimson Glory, reading everything he could find about human history. What he discovered made him question everything he had ever believed about strength and weakness. The humans had fought terrible wars among themselves, but they had also created incredible beauty. They had built weapons that could destroy their world, but they had also built hospitals to heal the sick. They had enslaved each other, but they had also died to free slaves. Most amazing of all, they had learned from their mistakes. Their history was full of examples of humans recognizing their own evil and working to become better. The Empire had never done such a thing. The Empire was perfect and unchanging, its ways established for all time. But what if the Empire was wrong? The thought was so shocking that Zelamon actually gasped. In 3 millennia of conquest, no Calvarian had ever suggested that the Empire might be mistaken about anything. The idea was literally unthinkable. Until now. Dr. Vasquez watched her monitors as reports flowed in from the quantum computers. The psychological profiles of the alien fleet were changing in real time. Logic patterns were breaking down. Emotional responses were increasing. Most importantly, the will to fight was disappearing. "Doctor," her assistant called, "we are reading massive disruptions in enemy communications. Many ships are no longer responding to their command structure. Some are actually powering down their weapons." Vasquez felt a mixture of triumph and horror. Project Lazarus was working exactly as designed. The human capacity for hope, love, and sacrifice was proving to be more powerful than any physical weapon. But seeing the psychological destruction of an entire fleet made her sick. "Begin Phase 3, she said quietly. "Give them the final transmission." This time, the signal carried not just human memories, but the core truth that bound them all together. It was the secret that made humans dangerous. Beyond all logic, their absolute refusal to accept defeat when fighting for something greater than themselves. The transmission showed the Calvarian fleet every moment in human history when ordinary people had chosen to sacrifice everything for an ideal. Parents dying for their children. Soldiers holding the line against impossible odds. Scientists working in secret to preserve knowledge during dark ages. But more than that, it showed them why these sacrifices mattered. It showed them how individual acts of courage created chains of inspiration that lasted for generations. How a single person's refusal to give up could change the fate of entire civilizations. Admiral Zeftar felt the transmission hit his flagship like a physical blow. Suddenly, he was experiencing the memories of a human general named Washington, crossing a frozen river to attack an enemy that should have been invincible. Then he was a nurse named Florence Nightingale, tending wounded soldiers when everyone said, "Women should not do such work." With each memory came a revelation that shattered another piece of his worldview. The Empire conquered through strength and fear. But these humans conquered through something far more powerful: the willingness to suffer for others. "Admiral," his communications officer called out in panic, "we are receiving surrender requests from our own ships. Captain Vorthak says his crew refuses to attack the planet. Commander Thelros reports that his weapons crew has locked down all firing controls. Over 300 ships have powered down their weapons." Zeftar staggered to his command chair, his mind reeling from the human memories still flooding through his consciousness. Around him, his own bridge crew was weeping openly. His tactical officer was staring at his screens as if he had never seen them before. "What have they done to us?" Zeftar whispered. His aide, tears streaming down his face, looked up from his console. "They have shown us what we could be, sir. What we should have been all along." Through the main viewing screen, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel. It looked so small and fragile. This world that had just defeated the greatest military force in the galaxy without firing a single shot. But Zeftar now understood that Earth's true strength had never been in weapons or shields. It was in the hearts of the beings who lived there. Beings who loved so deeply that they would face any enemy to protect what mattered to them. For the first time in his life, the proud admiral of the Calvarian Empire felt something he had never experienced before: shame. Shame that his people had spent 3,000 years conquering and destroying, when they could have been learning and growing. Shame that they had mistaken fear for respect and control for strength. Most of all, shame that it had taken the enemy they came to destroy to show them what true courage looked like. The Calvarian Empire's greatest fleet hung motionless in space around Earth like sleeping giants. Ship after ship drifted in orbit with their weapons powered down and their crews lost in contemplation of truths they had never imagined. Admiral Zeftar sat in his command chair, no longer the proud leader of an unstoppable armada. The human transmissions had stopped hours ago, but their effects continued to spread through his forces like ripples on a pond. Reports flowed in from across the fleet, captains requesting permission to study human culture, weapons officers refusing to target civilian populations, entire crews demanding to know why the Empire conquered peaceful species. Most disturbing of all were the messages from home. Word of the fleet's condition had reached the Calvarian capital, and the response was swift and brutal. The High Command was sending reinforcements with orders to destroy any ship that refused to complete the mission. "Admiral," his communications officer called softly, "we are receiving another transmission from the human planet." Zeftar looked up wearily. "Put it through." The screen showed not Admiral Chun, who had died defending her world, but the face of a human female with gray hair and tired eyes. Behind her stood rows of computer equipment in what appeared to be an underground facility. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez," the woman said. "I am responsible for the transmissions you have been receiving." Zeftar stared at her. This ordinary-looking human had somehow brought the Empire's mightiest fleet to its knees without firing a single shot. "How?" he asked simply. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "We call it Project Lazarus. It was created by my species over 200 years ago as the ultimate weapon, one that could destroy an enemy's will to fight by showing them what they were truly fighting against." "And what are we fighting against?" "Hope," she said simply. "Love. The human refusal to accept that anything is impossible when you are fighting for something greater than yourself. We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have destroyed us. Not because we are stronger than other species, but because we never give up. Ever. Captain Vorthag's voice came over the fleet communication channel. "Admiral, permission to speak freely?" Zephyr nodded, forgetting that Vorthag could not see him. "Granted. Sir, I have read everything our computers contain about human history. These beings have faced extinction dozens of times. They have survived by helping each other, by sacrificing for strangers, by choosing hope when logic demanded despair. How can we destroy a species that creates such beauty from such suffering?" Other captains joined the conversation. Commander Thelros spoke from the Imperial Wrath. "Admiral, my crew has voted unanimously to refuse all orders to attack Earth. We cannot be part of destroying something so precious." Similar reports came from across the fleet, ship after ship declaring that they would not participate in the destruction of humanity. Veterans who had conquered worlds without hesitation now found themselves unable to harm. Beings whose capacity for love and sacrifice had opened their eyes to possibilities they had never imagined. Dr. Vasquez watched this alien fleet tear itself apart from within and felt a mixture of triumph and sorrow. "Admiral Zephyr," she said, "your reinforcements will arrive in 6 days. When they do, they will find a fleet that has learned what it means to be truly alive. What will you do?" Zephyr was quiet for a long time. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that he did not know how to give. The Empire expected him to complete his mission or die trying. But the thought of destroying Earth now seemed like murdering his own children. "Doctor," he said finally, "what happened to the humans who created this weapon?" "They were horrified by what they had built," Vasquez replied. "The ability to destroy another being's will to fight, to break their spirit so completely that they lost all purpose. They decided no species should have such power. So they buried it and swore it would never be used again. But you used it. To save my species from extinction, yes. And now I am going to destroy it again, just as they did. Some weapons are too terrible for anyone to possess, even to defend themselves." Zephyr understood. The humans had created the perfect weapon and then thrown it away because using it made them into monsters. Even facing certain death, they had hesitated to use something so cruel against their enemies. What kind of species did such a thing? "Admiral," his aide approached cautiously, "the High Command is demanding an immediate response. They want to know when Earth will surrender." Zephyr looked out at the small blue world that had defeated his fleet without destroying a single ship. In all his years of military service, he had never faced an enemy that had made him question not just his tactics, but his entire way of life. "Send a message to the High Command," he ordered. "Tell them the mission has been completed." His aide looked confused. "Sir, but Earth has not surrendered." "No," Zephyr said quietly. "We have." The Admiral stood and walked to the main viewing screen. Earth hung there like a jewel against the darkness, beautiful and fragile and absolutely unconquerable. Not because its defenses were strong, but because its people possessed something that could not be defeated by force. "Send a message to all ships in the fleet," he ordered. "Any vessel that wishes to return to Calvarian space may do so. Any that wish to remain and learn more about these remarkable beings are free to make that choice." Across the fleet, captains made their decisions. Some ships, terrified by what they had experienced, turned and fled toward home. Others powered down their engines and settled into orbit around Earth, their crews eager to study a species that had taught them more about courage in a few hours than the Empire had in 1,000 years. Captain Vorthag was among those who stayed. As his ship took position in a peaceful orbit, he opened communications with the human survivors on the moon. "This is Captain Vorthag of the Crimson Talon. We wish to learn from you, if you will teach us." Dr. Vasquez watched the alien fleet break apart and felt the weight of history on her shoulders. Humanity had survived, but at a cost that few would understand. They had used their capacity for hope and love as a weapon, turning their greatest strength into a tool of war. "Doctor," her assistant called. "What are your orders regarding Project Lazarus?" Vasquez walked to the main computer terminal and placed her hand on the shutdown controls. On the screens around her, data flowed past, psychological profiles, emotional triggers, and all the carefully crafted cruelty that had broken an empire without firing a shot. "Delete everything," she said. "Wipe the quantum computers, destroy the satellite network, and bury this knowledge so deep that it can never be found again." "But doctor," this weapon could protect Earth from any future threat. Vasquez shook her head. "A species that uses its capacity for love as a weapon will eventually lose its ability to love at all. The humans who created this project understood that. Now I do too." As the computers shut down one by one, Dr. Vasquez thought about the future. The Calvarian Empire would never be the same. Word of what had happened at Earth would spread across the galaxy. Other species would learn that the mighty Crimson Fleet had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Some of the Calvarian ships were already requesting permission to establish diplomatic relations with Earth. Others wanted to study human art, music, and literature. A few had even asked if they could help rebuild the orbital stations their own weapons had destroyed. Above Earth, Admiral Zefter sent his final report to the High Command. It was not the message they expected. "The human species possesses a weapon we cannot counter," he wrote. "Not because it is technologically superior, but because it represents something we have never understood. They fight not just to survive, but to preserve ideals that give meaning to survival itself. They love so deeply that they will face any enemy to protect what matters to them. And in showing us this love, they have made us realize what we have become and what we could still be." He paused, looking out at Earth one more time. "I am resigning my commission and requesting asylum on the human world. Half my fleet is doing the same. We wish to learn from a species that values love over conquest, hope over efficiency, and meaning over mere survival. The war is over, not because we have been defeated, but because we have been awakened." The message flashed across space toward the Calvarian capital, carrying with it the news that the Empire's greatest fleet had been destroyed not by weapons, but by the simple recognition of what they could have been all along, on Earth. The sun rose over a world that had faced extinction and survived, not through military might or technological superiority, but through something far more powerful: the human refusal to let hope die, even in the darkest of times.